Dallas, Texas. September 1990 Rule. Stage 6 of the Las Colinas Studios complex, a working television production facility 20 miles west of downtown Dallas that had been hosting Walker, Texas Ranger since the show's first season in 1993. The stage was large enough to accommodate the show's interior set simultaneously. The Ranger headquarters, the CD's bar and grill set, and the open floor space reserved for the fight choreography sequences that had become the show's signature and the primary reason its audience kept returning week after week. By September 1994, the show was in its second season. The ratings had settled into the kind of consistency that network executives do not celebrate loudly but track very carefully, because consistency at that level in a Saturday night time slot is not something that happens by accident and is not something that can be easily replaced once it is gone. The stunt coordinator who arrived for the second season was not the coordinator who had built the show's fight sequences in the first season. His name was a matter of record in the production documents but is not relevant to what happened on that stage in September 1994. What is relevant is what he brought with him when he arrived, which was 15 years of experience on major studio productions, 3 Emmy nominations for stunt coordination, a genuine technical understanding of how to design action sequences for the camera, and a set of opinions about martial arts that he had developed over those 15 years of watching practitioners work on sets and that he had shared freely on every production he had been part of. The opinions were not malicious. They were the opinions of a man who had spent 15 years translating martial arts technique into camera-ready performance and who had developed, through that experience, a specific framework for thinking about what worked on screen and what did not. The framework was coherent and in many respects accurate. It was also missing something, and what it was missing was the understanding that the distance between what a genuine practitioner looks like on a training floor and what a genuine practitioner looks like on a camera mark is not a fixed distance. It varies by practitioner. For most practitioners it is substantial. For a small number of practitioners it is almost nothing at all, and the difference between those two categories is not visible from the outside until you have watched both kinds work. He arrived on stage 6 on the second Monday of September. The crew that met him was the same crew that had worked the first season, grips and gaffers and camera operators and production assistants who had spent 13 episodes watching Chuck Norris work and who had developed, through that observation, their own framework for thinking about what they were watching. The two frameworks were not the same framework. This would become apparent over the course of the morning. Chuck Norris was 54 years old that September. He had been training in martial arts for 36 years, since the morning in 1958 when he had walked into a dojo at Osan Air Base in South Korea as an 18-year-old airman and been shown a technique by an instructor who did not expect him to be able to replicate it. He had been replicating it, and everything that followed it, every morning since. Walker, Texas Ranger had given him something that his film career had not given him in quite the same way, which was the requirement to produce fight sequences on a television schedule. Film productions allowed time. Television did not allow time. A fight sequence that would have taken 2 days to shoot on a feature film had to be completed in 4 hours on Walker. This constraint had done something to his work that several people in the crew had noticed and that none of them had the precise vocabulary to describe, which was that it had compressed what he did into something that looked almost casual in its efficiency, the way extreme mastery of any physical skill eventually compresses into a motion that appears smaller than it is until you understand what is producing it. The new stunt coordinator did not have the first season as context. He arrived with his own context, which was 15 years of other productions and the framework those productions had built. He spent the first morning reviewing the scripts for the first 2 episodes of the season and meeting with the director and the writers about the action requirements. He was good at this. The meetings were productive. The director came away from them with a clearer picture of what the sequences were going to look like and the specific camera positions that would serve them best. In the afternoon, he walked the stage with the senior stunt performers who had worked the first season. He asked good questions. He listened carefully to the answers. He was building his understanding of the production's specific requirements and he was doing it methodically, the way experienced coordinators do when they arrive on an existing production and need to understand what has been established before they can decide what to change. It was during this walkthrough, standing near the fight space at the center of the stage with 3 senior stunt performers and 2 members of the camera crew, that he said the thing he said. The conversation had been about the upcoming episode's primary fight sequence, a confrontation in a warehouse that the scripts described as involving 6 opponents and requiring approximately 90 seconds of screen time. The coordinator was describing his approach to blocking the sequence, the specific positions and sightlines and camera moves that would make it work. He was speaking from genuine expertise, and the stunt performers were following him with the attention of people who recognized the expertise and were finding it useful. Then he made a turn in the conversation that was so natural and so embedded in what he had been saying that the people listening did not immediately register it as a turn. He said that the approach he was describing was designed to serve the lead, by which he meant Norris, in the most flattering way possible given the physical reality of working with a 54-year-old principal. He said it in the clinical tone of a production problem being addressed rather than a personal assessment being made. He said that at 54, with the kind of movement that tournament-style martial arts produced over decades of training, the priority had to be camera angle and editing rhythm rather than the kind of sustained choreography that younger practitioners could sustain. He said that the editorial solutions available in post-production were going to be doing a significant portion of the work that the physical performance could no longer be expected to do on its own. He said it to 3 stunt performers and 2 camera operators who had spent 13 episodes watching Chuck Norris work. The senior stunt performer closest to him, a man named Gary who had doubled Norris on 4 of the first season's episodes and who had therefore been physically present at close range during the sequences the coordinator was now describing as beyond Norris's physical capacity, did not say anything for a moment. He looked at the coordinator with an expression that the camera operator standing next to him would describe later as the expression of a man deciding whether to spend the energy required to explain something complicated or to simply let events explain it instead. Gary chose to let events explain it. He said that he understood the approach and that it was a reasonable framework for productions where the principal's physical capacity was the limiting factor. He said it carefully and without sarcasm. Then he said that on this particular production there might be some additional context that would be useful before the approach was finalized. He said that Chuck Norris typically arrived on stage at 6:30 in the morning. He said that the first thing Norris did when he arrived, before the crew briefing and before the first camera setup of the day, was work through his full training sequence in the space adjacent to the stage. He said that this sequence lasted between 45 minutes and an hour and that in 13 episodes he had never once seen it abbreviated or modified. Then he suggested that before the coordinator finalized the blocking approach, it might be worth watching one morning's arrival. The coordinator said that he appreciated the input and that he would keep it in mind. He said it in the tone of someone who has received a piece of information, filed it appropriately, and returned to the framework he arrived with. He did not adjust the framework. He spent the rest of the afternoon developing the blocking for the first episode's fight sequence along the lines he had described. The approach was technically competent. It was the approach of an experienced coordinator working from an accurate general understanding of how 54-year-old principals require accommodation. It would have served most 54-year-old principals well. It was built on an assumption that had not been tested against the specific person it was designed to serve. Chuck Norris arrived on stage 6 at 6:28 on Wednesday morning. He arrived the way he always arrived, without announcement, with a training bag over one shoulder, nodding to the crew members who were already on set and moving directly to the space adjacent to the stage where he worked every morning. Several crew members who were setting up for the day's first shot stopped what they were doing. Not all of them. The ones who had been there for the first season stopped. They had learned in the first season that the morning session was worth watching when you had a few minutes and nothing that required your immediate attention. The new stunt coordinator arrived at 7:15. He came through the main stage entrance and stopped. Chuck Norris was in the middle of the adjacent space, 45 minutes into his morning session. He was throwing combinations at a heavy bag with the speed and precision of someone who had been doing this specific thing for 36 years. Not demonstrating. Not performing. Working. The spinning heel kick that he had been refining since 1958 and that appeared in the opening credits of the show he was currently filming. The lead leg side kick with the hip loading that Bruce Lee had watched him develop at a New York tournament in 1968 and had then traveled to Torrance to learn. The rear hand combination that the best fighters on the tournament circuit in the 1960s had spent years trying to solve and had never fully solved. All of it thrown at a heavy bag on a Wednesday morning in Dallas at 6:58, before the crew briefing, before the first camera setup, before any of the editorial solutions that the coordinator had planned to deploy in service of physical capacity that was no longer there. The bag was moving the way heavy bags move when the person hitting them is hitting them correctly. The coordinator stood at the entrance to the adjacent space for approximately 3 minutes. 3 of the senior crew members who had been there for the first season were watching from positions around the space. None of them said anything. They did not need to say anything. The coordinator was watching the same thing they were watching, and the thing he was watching was not compatible with the framework he had arrived with, and everyone in the space understood this simultaneously without it being stated. He watched the session for 3 minutes. Then he walked to the production office and spent 40 minutes revising the blocking he had developed the previous afternoon. He revised it without being asked to revise it. He revised it because what he had watched for 3 minutes had made the previous afternoon's work inaccurate in a way that he was not willing to leave inaccurate. The revised blocking removed the editorial compensations and the camera angle accommodations that had been designed to cover for physical limitations that did not exist. It was better blocking. It served the sequence better. It was the blocking of a coordinator who understood what his principal could actually do rather than what coordinators with the same general framework generally expected a 54-year-old principal to be capable of. He brought the revised blocking to the morning briefing. Gary, the senior stunt performer who had suggested watching one morning's arrival, looked at the revised pages and then at the coordinator and then back at the pages. He did not say anything. He nodded once, the way people nod when an outcome they anticipated has arrived on schedule. Chuck Norris came in from the adjacent space at 7:45, toweled off, took the morning's pages from the production assistant, and sat down for the crew briefing. He did not know that the blocking had been revised. He did not know what the coordinator had said on Monday afternoon, or what he had watched on Wednesday morning, or the 40 minutes that had connected those two things. He looked at the pages with the attention he brought to everything that was going to require physical preparation and asked 2 questions about the sightlines on the warehouse set. The coordinator answered both questions. The answers were good. They reflected an understanding of what Norris was going to be able to do in that warehouse that the Monday afternoon version of the same coordinator could not have produced. The episode filmed on schedule. The fight sequence ran 91 seconds on screen. It required no editorial compensation and no camera angle accommodation. It looked like what it was, which was a 54-year-old man who had been training every morning for 36 years, performing the thing he had trained for, at the level that 36 years of daily preparation produces, in front of a camera operated by people who by Wednesday afternoon understood what they were pointing their cameras at. The stunt coordinator finished the season. He did not repeat the assessment he had made on Monday afternoon to anyone on the production for the remainder of his time there. Several years later, at an industry event, he told the story himself, in the specific way that people tell stories about their own errors of assumption when enough time has passed and the error is small enough relative to the correction that telling it reflects better on them than concealing it. He described the 3 minutes at the entrance to the adjacent space. He described revising the blocking. He said that in 15 years of stunt coordination he had revised his blocking before a shoot began exactly twice, and that both times it had been because he had watched something that made the previous version inaccurate and that he had not been willing to pretend otherwise. He did not mention what he had said on Monday afternoon. He did not need to. The story made the point without it.